Ukraine's independence came in 1991. The Soviet Union had collapsed, and as it splintered, a number of new nations emerged. Ukraine was one of the largest. Its population was 52 million. It was 1,200 kilometers from east to west. And as democracy moved east, this was a moment of optimism. In 1991, Ukrainians celebrated their first election. The US called it momentous. But for all the enthusiasm, democracy couldn't change Ukraine's geography or its history. To the east was Russia. To the west was Poland, Slovakia and Hungary. All three had communist past. By 2004, all three had joined the European Union. Being pro-Russia or pro-Europe became a fundamental dividing line in Ukrainian politics. And months later, we saw how. Amidst allegations of electoral fraud, what became known as the Orange Revolution began. And two men were the focus. Viktor Yanukovych, who was pro-Russia and who'd initially been declared the winner, and Viktor Yushchenko, here on the right, who was pro-Europe and would become president after a new vote. And while the outcome of that election was settled, relations with Russia were not. In 2010, there was a further twist. Yanukovych was re-elected, and then in 2013, he would take a decision with huge ramifications.
As EU leaders arrived for the Eastern Partnership Summit, something was missing. The centrepiece was supposed to have been the signing of an association agreement with Ukraine.
But it didn't happen. Under pressure from Russia, Yanukovych walked away from that deal with the EU, and another revolution would begin. There were weeks of protests and crackdowns, and in the end, Yanukovych would flee this country estate just outside Kiev and head for Russia. Watching from Moscow was Vladimir Putin. This was his cue to act. First, Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine. It's a peninsula on the Black Sea. Weeks later, pro-Russia rebels seized two regions in the east of Ukraine. Russia already divided Ukrainian politics. Now Putin was dividing the country itself. But the turn towards the West that frustrated him then remains now. One recent poll shows 68% of Ukrainians are in favor of joining the EU. Putin, though, sees Russians and Ukrainians as one people, a single whole. That perception may explain this invasion today, but perhaps there's something else too. The 90s brought a surge of democratic optimism. To Ukraine's current president, this invasion is showing us what Putin thinks of that.
Putin started a war against Ukraine, against the whole democratic world. He wants to destroy my country. He wants to destroy our country, everything we've been building, everything we live for.
That effort to build a nation began as Ukraine emerged from the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. Today, as Russia invades, Ukrainians are seeing the extent of Putin's resentment of what happened then and what's happened since.